Well, good evening. It's still the 22nd of January 23. It's about 11:15 in the evening, so forgive me if I conk out, fall asleep while I'm speaking. On the channel over the last few months, you've probably, if you're a regular viewer for that reason, you've probably seen me in a lot of occasions talking about number equations and numerical values, and my opinion that all of us are, have been appointed a certain sequence of digits which we follow. I'm not talking a handful of numbers, I'm talking billions, which exist in our whole lifetime. And these numbers match up with other people that you come across. So they won't have the same numbers, but every so often there will be a sequence of numbers which mean you attach yourself to someone. I'm not talking about relationship attachment, I'm just talking about encountering people. There's also the aspect of the matrix, but I don't really talk about the matrix. I don't go for that. I tend to speak about a more three-dimensional, possibly five-dimensional spider's web, where each of the the strands of the web. If you've ever watched a spider build a web, or if you've gone out a frosty morning, particularly in the autumn, and you've seen a spider's web, it's beautiful. But if you consider all the strands all interconnected, well, I feel that that's the same as our presence within the universe itself. And although we may not expand ourselves into the universe, I think we do during the times when we're not conscious, i.e. when we're sleeping. I think sleep is I talk a lot about up and downs energies, for example. I talk a lot about dreams and creating your own reality and stuff. I could cover all these stories in much more depth, but what I'm referring to this evening is the spider's web of situations which, at a given time in history, on the timeline, I don't consider the timeline being a horizontal line which is marked off like some would say. Time is completely scattered. That clock up there sits constantly telling me it's 9:48 or 22:48, but neither of them are correct, because that's not the time. And it's irrelevant what that clock says anyway, because we're all in our own time. And the pace of time is different for all of us at given times. And the pace of the day can be quickened or slowed just entirely by what you're doing. The other thing that I want to mention is I spoke about a lady called Cookie Annie yesterday. And I was sitting here 24 hours ago just thinking about Cookie Annie. And if you consider that the location that I saw this lady was in the high street next to the fishmonger fruiterer that I described, and the reasons for going to that particular shop on so many occasions, because of my fondness for the assistant in the shop, and the fact that I enjoyed a particular brand of yogurt. But I eventually stayed above that fruiterer's. It was then, well, at that time it would be a pet shop, of all things. But this Cookie Annie actually stayed in a place called Alma Place, which is not far from the high street. One of the very first rented properties I ever took. This is only came to my thoughts last night when I started to join the puzzle together. I was thinking as a young boy, always trying to avoid her dog Flossie if it was sitting outside the entrance to Alma Place. Alma Place was a series of very, very old houses. They were weavers' houses. And in a space in front of these houses was a massive well. There was a larger Victorian mansion that sat in the grounds with many rooms. But it wasn't a courtyard, but let's describe it as a kind of grass-covered courtyard because the well had been filled in. But what had come together last night was the fact that this Cookie Annie woman, whom I never saw at all between perhaps October and March, I started to think, did she suffer from the very similar condition that I suffer from, i.e. seasonal affective disorder, which prevented her from leaving her home in the winter months? I don't know. But I never saw very much of her. But on the days that she seemed to surface, and when a dog wasn't present guarding the area, which is known as Ramsay Street, I used to sit right in the middle of the road. And as I left my gran's on the high street to scatter down Ramsay Street, I'd have to change of plans and reroute myself in order to not be bitten by Flossie. But this woman would be at the window, almost as though she was aware that I was coming up the hill, but she would look over and I would look at her. And again, she would wear the black hat. I don't know how many people would wear a black hat inside the house, but she did. She was leaning out the window with the black cloak around her and the black hat. She's a very white face, very white. But the thing I'm mentioning here about this is the very window that she was leaning out. Let me just say, of course, that in the late 1970s, possibly into the 1980s, these houses were then refurbished, but the original structures remained. And when I took this flat on, and this is when the penny dropped last night, it was exactly the same flat that she lived in, that I found myself in. I thought that was quite incredible. I'd never thought about this in all the years until last night after talking about her, and it clicked. I also remember the time when I was in the in my bedroom, and it was a bedsit, and it must have been after midnight, and I heard the most almighty scream. Not within the house, I have to say, but the scream was deafening and echoed. I dashed to the window and scurried down, got my clothes on, went outside, couldn't see anything, find any problems anywhere. And then I thought it sounded very much like somebody falling down a well. That's what it sounded like. There used to be a little brick type house. It was an office for a chap called Peter Wiley. He was a builder who'd never done any building work. And I certainly remember this chap. He always had a long raincoat type thing on and a bonnet. And he very rarely spoke to anybody. And he sat in that office I presume all day. He never done any work. I don't know what he did, but he's Peter Wiley. But yeah, so I was thinking about magic and the way things appear, and I mean I've had relationships that I've thought about and then met them. I've had jobs that I've thought about and then, years later got the job. I've actually been in a building for an interview for a job, and was very familiar with the layout of the building itself. Many times this has happened, more than I probably realise, but certainly many of them come to mind. As far apart as London and the Highlands of Scotland. It's very odd. And I very much consider that what happens is whilst we're asleep, whilst we're dreaming, there's something happening with the digits that I talk about are being calculated in although the number, these digits never stop flowing, I believe there's every so often they pause. I kind of like, let me just think what that would be like. Like a computer screen which freezes, perhaps, just briefly, and then moves on, or a television screen which blurps a little and then comes back to normal, that type of thing. And I think it's in these occasions in sleep, something that occurs that as this pause happens, there's a snapshot which is taken, and the mind takes the information and transfers it into pictures for us. And these pictures are, of course, dreams. We don't remember all our dreams, you see, but the mind most certainly does. And I'm quite sure that the mind then has this information, but can't facilitate the information as to, this is not a memory. What is it? And so therefore the waking start of the brain then connects with this photographic image, for the want of a better expression, and it starts to manifest it as reality. So I remember one time in 1989, in February time, I think it was, and I said to my girlfriend, I said, I'm dashing off to London. Why are you doing this, Andy? Why are you going to London? You're meant to be doing your course. And what's going on? What about me? What? Everything was as it was. And I remember going to London, and I remember going to this, I better not give the name actually, but it was a 470 bedroom hotel. And I got this interview, and I walked in, and I turned to the left. I said to the chap who was going to interview, well, will we go, is this the office over here? He didn't say office, but he says, have you been here before? I says, no. You seemed to know your way around. It was not quite as black and white as that. It was a bit more bizarre. But I was in a location which I'd already been before. And I can only assume that I had dreamt it. It's very difficult to articulate these kind of things, to be honest. But I remember, as I say, my connections to places with the fairy type people. And the fairies are not little delicate things that with feathers or wings and stuff like that. They don't have to be. They do exist, of course. I'm talking human fairies. I'm talking angelic figures, and I'm talking all sorts here. I meet so many people who meet in that category. I remember the day my father passed away. I'm sorry to be slightly sad. It's not morbid, it's just a fact of life. But I was going to gather the available bus to go to the city hospital. And there was a girl there whom I'd never met and I've never seen before or since. And she was there for me, standing. And I said to her, "Have you been camping?" And she said, "Yes." And she told me the most remote, obscure location just north of Glenalmond in the mountains which I have walked upon. And I says, "Really? You've been there camping? How long were you there for?" And she said, "Oh, just for one evening." I says, "May I ask where you're from?" She says, "Yes, I'm from London." And I never really thought about this. I won't go into all the situation about Father's death, but what I'm saying is she was there at that very moment. She offered me a great deal of calm and a great deal of structure to the event, because I'd obviously told her that I was waiting for a bus needed to go to hospital to see Dad. And she said, "I'm ever so sorry to hear this." And the conversation then came up about the camping. But I have never thought about it, but can you actually imagine coming all the way from London to go to this remote location that hardly anyone knows about? Goodness me, even the people in Glenalmond don't even know about it, I'm sure. I thought, how extraordinary that she should come all that way to be there for one night and then get down to the bus stop to meet me at that time. It just didn't make sense. How did she get from this place to the bus stop? It just didn't make sense. So I have so many stories I'd love to share in regards to all these particular events. But my life is full of them. And it's It's not at all frightening, but it does feel ever so different from many of the normal things that we deal with in life.